Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we bring you a chilling and twisted tale, one of ambition, betrayal, and a deadly secret hidden beneath the bright lights of college football. A tale of rivalry, deception, and shocking revelations. This story will leave you wondering, what happens when the pursuit of glory turns into a dangerous obsession? Stay with us as we unravel the dark and suspenseful story of the Silent Playmaker. Under the roaring crowds and the glory of the championship, a secret was buried deep within the hearts of the players. When the star quarterback goes missing on the eve of the biggest game of the season, what unravels next is a web of betrayal and lies that no one could have imagined. The Coldridge Cougars were on the brink of history. The team, once dismissed as underdogs, had clawed their way to the top with an undefeated record, securing their spot as the favorites to win the national championship. The entire season had been a roller coaster of thrilling victories, and the players were basking in the anticipation of making history. At the heart of their success was Zane Harper, the team's golden boy. With his strong arm, quick reflexes, and magnetic charisma, Zane was more than just the quarterback. He was the face of the team, adored by fans and celebrated by sports analysts as the key to the Cougars' meteoric rise. But football is never a one-man show, and in the shadow of Zane's spotlight stood Jared Price, a player whose contributions were just as vital, though less recognized. Jared, the team's wide receiver, was quiet and unassuming, a player who let his skills on the field speak for themselves. Time after time, he had made game-saving catches, often pulling off plays so daring that they left commentators and spectators in awe. Yet, despite his consistent brilliance, Jared remained overlooked, his accomplishments eclipsed by Zane's larger-than-life persona. The team dynamics were far from harmonious. Beneath the camaraderie expected of a championship-bound squad simmered an undercurrent of rivalry and resentment. Zane's fame, while celebrated by many, had begun to breed whispers of discontent among some of his teammates. Jared, in particular, couldn't ignore the growing feeling that his hard work was going unnoticed. But he wasn't the only one harboring frustrations. Marcus Dean, the defensive captain and a player known for his intensity on and off the field, had clashed with Zane on more than one occasion over decisions that put individual glory ahead of teamwork. Despite these tensions, the team soldiered on, their collective goal keeping them focused. Practices were grueling, and every player pushed themselves to their limits, knowing the championship was within reach. The coaches, aware of the bubbling discontent, emphasized unity, but the cracks were becoming harder to ignore. Small, seemingly insignificant incidents began to pile up, a misplaced playbook here, a pointed remark there, each adding to the growing sense that something wasn't quite right. As the championship game approached, the pressure mounted. The media frenzy surrounding the Cougars intensified, with reporters lining up to interview Zane. Jared, meanwhile, was left to endure questions about Zane's leadership and what it was like to play in his shadow. The divide between the team's star quarterback and its unsung hero widened, though no one dared speak openly about it. Then came the whispers. Rumors began circulating among the players about a secret Zane was keeping, something that could explain his unshakable confidence and occasional arrogance. Some brushed it off as typical locker room gossip, but others couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Zane Harper than met the eye. The eve of the championship arrived, and the team gathered for their final strategy meeting. Spirits were high, but the unease lingered like a shadow over the room. No one could have predicted that this night would mark the beginning of the end, that before the game's first whistle blew, the Cougars would face a crisis far more devastating than any opponent. In the quest for glory, secrets were about to surface, and not everyone would escape unscathed. The night before the championship game should have been one of celebration and anticipation, but it turned into a nightmare for the Coldridge Cougars. The team gathered in the conference room of their hotel, going over the final game strategies. The air was thick with a mix of nerves and excitement. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, one absence became glaringly obvious. Zane Harper was nowhere to be seen. At first, no one panicked. Zane was known for his flair for the dramatic, and some assumed he might be running late or indulging in some pre-game ritual away from the team. But as the meeting wore on without any word from him, concern began to set in. Calls to his phone went unanswered. A coach was sent to check his hotel room, only to find it eerily empty. The only clue left behind was a single cleat lying outside his door, a strange and ominous sight. What made it even stranger were the words scrawled across the side of the cleat: "You can't outrun the truth." The mood among the team shifted from confusion to unease. The coaching staff tried to keep everyone focused, urging the players to stay calm and concentrate on the game ahead. The media and fans couldn't know about Zane's disappearance. It would cause chaos and derail everything they had worked for all season. But keeping the news contained was easier said than done. Whispers of something being wrong spread quickly among the players, and the weight of uncertainty began to gnaw at them. Jared Price felt the unease more acutely than anyone. As the team's wide receiver, he knew Zane better than most. They had shared the spotlight for months, their connection on the field hailed as the backbone of the team's success. But now, with Zane missing, Jared was suddenly thrust into an unfamiliar and uncomfortable position. The coaches announced that Jared would step in as quarterback for the championship game, a decision born of desperation rather than faith in his abilities. Jared tried to focus on the task ahead, but his mind kept drifting back to the cleat and the cryptic message. Something about it felt personal, almost like a warning meant for someone who knew Zane well. Jared couldn't shake the feeling that Zane's disappearance wasn't random, that it was tied to the tensions that had been bubbling beneath the surface all season. The team went to bed that night in a state of disarray, their confidence shaken. As Jared lay in his room, unable to sleep, he thought back to an argument he had overheard just days earlier between Zane and Marcus Dean. The words were muffled, but the anger in their voices was unmistakable. Jared couldn't remember all the details, but one thing stood out clearly. Zane had mentioned something about a deal and warned Marcus to stay out of his way. The next morning arrived with no sign of Zane. The game loomed, and the team had no choice but to push forward. Jared, though inexperienced as a quarterback, played with a ferocity that surprised everyone, leading the Cougars to a narrow victory. But even as the crowd erupted in celebration, Jared couldn't shake the hollow feeling in his chest. Zane's absence loomed over the victory like a dark cloud, and Jared knew this was far from over. The cleat, the cryptic message, the heated argument had all pointed to something much larger than a simple disappearance. As the confetti rained down and the Cougars were crowned champions, Jared realized the championship might have come at a cost none of them were prepared to face. The championship game had ended in triumph, but the victory felt hollow. The team should have been reveling in their hard-earned success, yet Zane Harper's unexplained disappearance loomed like a shadow over the celebration. For Jared Price, the night marked a turning point, not just for the team, but for himself. Despite his inexperience as quarterback, he had delivered under pressure, making critical plays that secured the win. The media hailed him as the unexpected hero, but he couldn't enjoy the praise. His mind remained fixated on Zane's absence and the troubling clues he couldn't ignore. As the post-game celebrations died down, Jared found himself unable to let go of the strange events leading up to the game. The cleat, the cryptic warning, and Zane's mysterious disappearance gnawed at him. He replayed everything he knew in his mind, trying to piece together a puzzle that felt increasingly sinister. His thoughts kept drifting back to Marcus Dean, the team's defensive captain. Jared couldn't forget the tension that had been brewing between Marcus and Zane in the weeks leading up to the game. There was something in Marcus's demeanor during the championship, an intensity that went beyond the usual pressure of competition. The next day, Jared decided to dig deeper. He started with Zane's dorm room, hoping to find some clue that might explain his absence. The room was untouched, as though Zane had simply vanished without a trace. As Jared sifted through Zane's belongings, he stumbled upon a leather-bound journal tucked away in a drawer. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary notebook filled with game strategies and personal musings. But as Jared flipped through the pages, he noticed entries that stood out. Zane had written about feeling trapped, about secrets he couldn't reveal for fear of destroying his career. He mentioned a deal and alluded to a powerful group that was pulling strings behind the scenes. One phrase appeared repeatedly: the Silent Playmaker. Jared didn't know what it meant, but it sent a chill down his spine. Toward the back of the journal, the entries became increasingly frantic. Zane had written about blackmail, about someone threatening to expose him if he didn't cooperate. Jared's discovery only deepened his unease. It was clear Zane had been hiding something significant, something that might have led to his disappearance. He couldn't help but wonder if Marcus knew more than he was letting on. Jared's instincts told him to confront Marcus, but he also knew he had to tread carefully. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than a simple rivalry. The following night, Jared decided to return to the stadium, drawn by a nagging feeling that more answers might be hidden there. Walking through the empty locker room, he noticed something he hadn't seen before: a loose tile near Zane's locker. Beneath it, he found a folded piece of paper. On it were hastily scribbled notes, names, dates, and dollar amounts. At the bottom of the page was one line that made Jared's blood run cold. Trust no one, not even your teammates. Jared realized he was now in the middle of something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Zane's disappearance wasn't random, and the clues pointed to a conspiracy that involved more people than just Marcus. As he stood alone in the silent locker room, Jared couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, and he began to wonder if he was next. Jared's search for answers had led him to a terrifying realization. Zane's disappearance was not an accident. It was a carefully orchestrated move, part of a far-reaching conspiracy that threatened to unravel everything the Coldridge Cougars had worked for. The discovery of Zane's journal and the cryptic notes had only deepened the mystery. Yet, there was one person who seemed to know more than anyone else: Marcus Dean. As the defensive captain, Marcus had always been a bit of an enigma, but Jared's suspicions had only grown since their heated argument a few days before the championship game. Jared confronted Marcus in private, hoping to uncover the truth. At first, Marcus denied everything, insisting that Zane's disappearance had nothing to do with him. But Jared wasn't convinced. He had seen something in Marcus's eyes during their argument, something that hinted at more than just rivalry. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was desperate. Desperate to protect something or someone. The more Marcus spoke, the clearer it became that he was involved in something much darker than anyone realized. Underneath his tough exterior, Marcus revealed that he had been part of a covert betting ring that involved college athletes from rival teams. The stakes were high, and the risks were even higher. Zane had found out about the operation and had threatened to go public with it. His refusal to stay silent had put everyone involved in jeopardy. But Marcus swore up and down that he hadn't harmed Zane. He claimed that the real threat was coming from someone else, someone with far more to lose than he had. Jared's mind raced as he processed what Marcus had said. The world of illegal gambling, blackmail, and corruption was something Zane had never hinted at, but it made sense in a way. The pressure to succeed, to win at all costs, had driven the players to make dangerous deals in the shadows. Zane had always been so focused on his own career that it never occurred to Jared that he might be hiding something far more dangerous beneath the surface. But if Marcus was telling the truth, then Zane's disappearance wasn't just about rivalry, it was about survival. Jared needed more answers, and he wasn't going to get them by relying on Marcus. So he returned to the one place that might hold the key to everything: the stadium. The locker room was empty and eerily quiet, its usual buzz of activity replaced by silence. As Jared walked down the hall, he felt the weight of the past few days pressing down on him. He had already uncovered so much, but he was no closer to understanding why Zane had vanished or who was truly behind it. It wasn't until Jared reached Zane's locker that he found the next piece of the puzzle. Beneath the locker's bottom shelf, hidden in a small compartment, he discovered a second notebook, one that looked almost identical to the journal he had found earlier. This one was filled with detailed notes about the betting ring, names of players involved, and records of money exchanged. As Jared flipped through the pages, he realized the extent of the operation. This wasn't just a few bets placed on the side. It was a vast network that involved coaches, players, and people far beyond the team. And at the center of it all, Zane had been the one to threaten exposure. Jared's heart pounded in his chest as he pieced together the truth. Zane had been targeted because he knew too much, and now, with him out of the picture, the cooperation could continue without fear of exposure. But the question remained: who was behind it? Who stood to gain the most from Zane's silence? As Jared stood there holding the notebook, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Someone somewhere was aware of his discovery, and they wouldn't hesitate to make sure he never found out more. Jared couldn't escape the sinking feeling that something was horribly wrong. The pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but they only led to more questions. Zane's journal, the hidden notebook in the locker room, and the ominous notes pointed to something far darker than just a rivalry between teammates. The betting ring, the blackmail, the secrecy, it was all interconnected, and it all led back to one key question: who was behind Zane's disappearance? Jared had uncovered enough to know that the danger was far from over, but the answers he sought came with risks he wasn't prepared for. As Jared stood alone in the locker room, holding the notebook that contained the damning evidence of the betting ring, the weight of his discovery hit him. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was being watched. Every step he took felt like it was being tracked, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he turned to leave. He wasn't sure whether it was paranoia or something far more dangerous, but he couldn't risk being seen with the notebook. It had to be kept hidden, or he would become the next target. Jared decided to confront Marcus once more. The defensive captain had been cagey about his involvement in the illegal betting ring, but Jared knew Marcus wasn't the mastermind. There was someone else pulling the strings, someone far more powerful, someone who had been orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. As Jared approached Marcus's dorm room, His mind raced with possibilities. He had already uncovered that Marcus had been swept up in the scheme, but he wasn't the one calling the shots. When Jared knocked on the door, he was met with a familiar face, Ethan Cole, the backup linebacker, who greeted him with a tight smile. Jared felt an unsettling tension in the air. Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes, and for the first time, Jared noticed something off about him. There was a coldness that hadn't been there before, a guardedness that sent a chill down Jared's spine. Ethan invited him in, but something in Jared's gut told him to stay cautious. The more he thought about it, the more it seemed that Ethan was the missing link in the chain of events. Inside the room, as they talked about the team's preparations for the next season, Jared's mind couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led into a trap. Ethan was being unusually vague, his answers cryptic and half-hearted. The conversation felt like a carefully constructed performance, one that Jared didn't buy for a second. He had heard rumors about Ethan's growing ambition to be more than just a backup player. As Jared pushed further, the cracks in Ethan's facade began to show. It wasn't until he returned to the hotel that the full truth finally came crashing down. While sifting through the documents and notes he had gathered, Jared stumbled upon a shocking revelation. In the back of the notebook, a list of names had been written: coaches, players, and one name that stopped Jared's heart: Ethan Cole. It was Ethan, not Marcus, who had been behind the operation. Ethan had manipulated Marcus, and when Zane threatened to expose everything, Ethan had acted quickly. In a panic, he had confronted Zane and, in the heat of the moment, caused his accidental death. The realization hit Jared like a punch to the gut. Ethan, the quiet, seemingly harmless player, had orchestrated Zane's disappearance to protect the betting ring that was making him rich. What started as a rivalry had turned into a deadly game of survival. Jared had unknowingly been thrust into the middle of it, and now with the truth in his hands, he was the next target. In a frantic rush, Jared tried to reach out to the authorities, but it was too late. Ethan had already covered his tracks. The security footage from the night Zane went missing had been deleted, and any evidence of Ethan's involvement had been carefully erased. Jared was left with nothing but the knowledge of the truth and a terrifying realization that he had no one to trust. As he stood in the darkened hotel room, staring at the damning evidence in his hands, Jared knew the game was far from over. The forces behind Zane's disappearance weren't finished with him yet, and with Ethan's growing power, Jared feared the worst was still to come. Thank you for joining us on Mystery Minds. The story of the Silent Playmaker reminds us that ambition and rivalry, when taken too far, can lead to devastating consequences. What do you think? Was this a case of blind ambition, or were there warning signs everyone ignored? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for more gripping stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.